Hey guys, and welcome back to the third episode of the podcast. Today's guest is Hunter. Thank you for being here, Hunter.
Glad to be here.
How are you doing?
Given the conditions of the high school and where I am at in it, I'm doing pretty good.
It's good to hear. Definitely strange times. I guess we'll cut right to the chase. I know recently there's been the Drake ASB elections, which I know unfortunately didn't go your way, which sorry about, but you definitely had a very powerful campaign and something very unique, I think, compared to a lot of the other campaigns I've ever seen, because you proposed the idea of an political party for Drake. And so I'm not sure everyone got the chance to really hear about as much. And so I want to give you the platform to talk more about that, at least for the future, because I'm sure you carry those ideas today, even though you didn't get to where you want it to be ideally.
Yeah, I imagine for a lot of kids running in student government, odds are they have very selfish desires when it comes to their motivation as to why they're doing that. They want college credit. They do it because they want to be part of a certain group or project a certain identity. For me, it was never really about that. I don't have any friends connected to ASB, and at this rate, I'm not getting into any fancy college. For me, what it was about was around freshman year, I was asking myself, what can I do to help the high school that I'm at? And it basically led me down this insane road of realizations about my high school, the administration, and the world we're living in today. Namely, the hand that the administration has in controlling what kids can and can't do, or what kids can and can't say. Moreover, what people can and can't do.
Mm-hmm.
I think this all started, I can actually put a specific date on it. I don't remember what day it was. I remember it was November of freshman year. I was in my science class and we were informed that a student had committed suicide at Drake. And I remember thinking, what could I have done to help that? In some way, I felt partially responsible because, even just somebody passing by that person and making some kind of gesture to show that they care could have prevented that from happening. Later, I heard of information that seemed to imply that this person did what they did because of how they were feeling about their relationship with the school, and they were them trying to manage how they felt about that. So I realized there were some serious issues there. So the first thing I thought of later on when it came to trying to figure out how I could give back to the high school that I was at was, how can I ensure that these kids are going to have happy and healthy lives at this high school without that stuff being taken away? And that was pretty much the beginning of the idea for the party, because I realized pretty quickly after I was almost SARB'd freshman year because I wasn't attending classes because frankly I was in an abusive household, and I was just too stressed to do that. I realized that the administration was not my friend in that situation. The friendliness of the administration depended on whether or not I was reflecting a good standard to the high school. If I was not a valedictorian or top of the football team, or at the very least, not being objectionable in any way to the administration, then I wasn't doing something right in their eyes. It was almost like I was more a product than somebody that the school was trying to raise. And one can say that school's not family. and there's some merit to that. But to be completely frank with you, my family was no family to me. I mean, I was put in foster care in sophomore year because of what was going on there. School was my family. Those were the people I care about. My
Yeah.
friends at school are the ones who saved my ass when stuff hit the fan sophomore year. I was gone about a month because of all that stuff, and it was absolutely chaotic.
Well, yeah, I've definitely
So
noticed that like the school tends to look at people a lot more just like, oh, values and not necessarily as a person. And for part of me understands why that happens, because they do have a lot of students, and it's hard to keep track, but it's like the school has a responsibility for these students. Like they are under their jurisdiction during the school day. So it's like, it's the school's responsibility to look after these kids. And for me, it's like, I've done things that are more aligned with like, oh, what the school is looking for. And so there's certain things, but I see like people like you or other people, the school doesn't acknowledge it as much. And I feel like it's a lot more up to the students that happens, but so much gets lost in the cracks. So I really understand where you're coming from in this point.
yeah, around the end of freshman year, I started writing some of my thoughts down to try and figure out, like, okay, what am I doing here? Like, what's this plan going to look like? And that writing basically turned into the basic plan for what I now call academicism, which is the idea that if kids, students, want to make a change of any kind in their high school, if they want to make that change and if they want to protect it, it's got to be more than just them making changes on an individual level, like giving kids the right to do this or the privilege to do that. It has to be something protected by the student body at large, or else the administration will find a reason to come in and say, no, we don't want you doing this. And it's because of that writing that I began to realize what position I was putting myself in. Because around sophomore year, I was kicked out of my house and I was telling people about the conditions in my house, and it was absolutely awful. My mom was doing meth. She had tons of people coming in and out of the house. She was talking about like the end of days coming. She had really gotten into like Christian evangelical stuff in the last year or two of my being there. And eventually I said, that's it. I'm out of here. Well, more accurately, I got kicked out, but I would have left on my own volition anyway. So I started talking to people about what was going on there. And in retaliation, my mom said that I was going to shoot up Drake High School. And I didn't realize she had said that for a couple days until the police found me. And I got locked away for like a week while they interrogated me and tried to figure out what was going on. Needless to say, things were worked out, and my mom has since fled the state and gone to Texas. And I've been living happily in a foster house here in Marin County ever since. But that was still a very messed up scenario for me to go through. But how this all ties into the writing that I was doing was that she pointed to my writing and said that that writing was proof of me being homicidal or whatever. Because she said a couple different things. She had a couple different stories about how I was horrible, which were contradictory to one another, but they all had the same message of me being a homicidal maniac. So that writing was examined by the police, and because of that, the police gave it to the administration. So now I find myself in a situation where the administration has access to my writing, which clearly does not reflect them in a positive light, without my permission, because of the decisions of the police department and my mom. So
If you don't mind me
that
asking, what were there specific things she pointed to in that writing? You don't have to share, obviously, if you don't want to, but
I'm
like,
happy to share.
if like she's portraying you as this like homicidal person, it's like, was there stuff in there that's more aggressive in your writing? I feel like
No.
that's no.
There's a quote by Isaac Asimov that goes, I hope it's by Isaac Asimov. I hope I'm not misquoting this. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And Tia here, my mom, made an extraordinary claim. The evidence was lacking. She said that I mentioned school shootings in the writing, and I did mention school shootings. I said that school shootings were in part what happens when kids feel like they have no connections to other people around them in an artificial environment created by the administration. And that the best way to fix that is to give kids a feeling of being connected. And a system like the party would be really helpful with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the context in which I mentioned school shootings. And there's plenty of other situations where she tried pointing to stuff like that, and it ended up not being the case.
Well, I remember because we were in TLC together, and for our sophomore year, end of the year thing, we had to do TED Talks. And you went towards the end of all the TED Talks, you gave this TED Talk about like your life and that experience with your mom, everything that's going on in there. And I remember everyone was just kind of in shock because no one had heard of any of this. And we're like, whoa, this guy's life is like, there's so much going on. And I think it's important for people to hear stuff like that, because the story that's portrayed so often is the story that the school wants to hear. And having stories like this is like, this goes on, like, and the school needs to acknowledge that and not just trying to push down these people or suppress their voices. So what you did, I thought was very kind of powerful and liberating for, I'm sure, many other students who, I don't know if any others are in quite as, I don't, for lack of a better word, insane kind of situation, but I'm sure people have stuff going on, and hearing that other people like this, it's not this, perfect society that the school wants it to be, is very meaningful. So yeah, I just like to acknowledge how kind of just powerful that was. And like even talking about it now, it's just like, wow. But yeah, so going on from that, so you went for those writings. How did that continue down that path towards the party?
Okay, so because the administration had the writing of mine, clearly the gig was up. It's like, oh crap, the Chad Stewart, Liz Seabury, they know what I think of what's going on at the school, and they know I'm not happy. So clearly I had to take a different approach with this. My original approach was that I was going to get into student government, and I was just going to start talking about this kind of stuff. And I was going to keep it like in the dark before then. I was just going to like spring up once I got into the class. Clearly that's not going to happen now because the administration knows what I'm doing. They know what I'm planning. So I can't just advocate for the ideas that I'm talking about. Clearly the next step that I have to take is to re-strategize how I'm going to get into student government and help the kids the way I had promised myself that morning when I learned about the kid who committed suicide. It was during that time that it started becoming more clear the importance of having kids standing beside you who are willing to take the risks that you're willing to take as well. That's kind of where the party itself started. I started a club called the Drake Community Club, which was kind of like an undercover party platform for kids to come in. And we had some interesting conversations in there. I think the max amount of members that we ever got in there was like 15, something like that. It wasn't very big, but it was a start and it was cool. So the next step in my mind was to start planning for the big campaign. Like when I try and run for office, I had to present myself. So I did. I was getting ready. There was a whole lot planned. This is sophomore year, by the way. There was a whole lot planned. Everything was going amazing. And then a week before the student elections began, I was called into the office and I was told that I would not be allowed to run. I asked why. They said that they had concerns, quote unquote, from the student body and teachers and members of the community about what I was trying to do. And that's when I realized that they knew what I was doing, so they were going to try and make any excuse to keep me from running. And what was the thing? There's one of the things they used was a GIF of Pepe the Frog that was in a Google slide on my computer, and they used that as evidence of me being a political extremist. And it's like, dude, like, you're not a meth addicted cult leader. You're $1 million school administration. Like, you have to be more imaginative than this, because you know this is going to look bad if I ever talk about this on a podcast with other people. But clearly, I think their idea was that if they just kept me from winning the elections, it would never become an issue in the first place. Just beat him down until he's not going to talk.
Mm-hmm.
So I left sophomore year feeling very dejected, very disappointed, and upset, honestly, that the administration was willing to go so far to stop me from even getting into the class. Like, there were kids who were lucky enough to have student government classes in middle school who were immediately allowed to get into the student government class at Drake. I was not allowed to do that because Lagunitas Middle School does not have a student government class. So for some reason, these kids get the privilege of going there first before me.
Yeah, wow.
So yes, not freshman year, junior year. Junior year, it starts off, I'm like, okay, the administration clearly does not want me or any of my ideas to come into effect, and they're going to do anything they can to stop me. So I thought to myself, if they're going to do whatever they can to use the rules against me, why should I follow the rules? Why am I adhering to ideas that they're putting forth and letting them make the rules of the game for me when they're unfairly putting those rules against me? So junior year, beginning of it was a lot of planning. And then around January or February, me and my friend, who I won't say his name on here because I don't know if he wants me saying his name, but I'll call him O. He's one of the admins. O and I officially made the party profile public. Like, it had existed for a while, but we made it public and we started posting. We started like spam following people. So that was really cool. Another thing was that I was going into the library and skipping classes to like get papers and posters printed. Like, people, the teachers were like, "Hey, what's going on? Why haven't you been here for like 3 weeks?" I'm like, "I don't know, I've just been sick." But I got a lot of posters. So I even, after a lot of work with the librarian, I managed to get stickers out and like started slapping them all over the place and like giving strips out to people. So there was like the little Vote Hunter stickers all over the place, and that was amazing. I noticed some of them even ended up on other candidates' posters, which I wasn't too happy about, but whatever. So they looked like things were going amazing. Every single person I talked to during the campaign season, once it started, while we were at school, I was like, "Hey, how many posters of mine have you seen?" And consistently they'll be like, about 3, 5, something like that. And then I'd ask them, "How many pictures of Ella Acker have you seen?" And they'll say, "Who?" It's like nobody saw Ella Acker's posters, because although she had some really big, nicely laminated, fancy posters, she just had 3, or I think 2 of them, something like that. So clearly my message was getting out to a lot more people. And that's when I started upping the act on social media. And this is when the lockdown started. We were out of school. I was saying, I remember one video I said something to the effect of, I'm willing to get suspended if that means helping the student body and getting my views out there. And that's honest,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not here to look good. I'm not here to get a good grade. I'm here because I care. I'm here because I care about the students and the teachers around me, not because I want to prove to somebody that I'm better than them. And
Do you
that's when I
think
got,
do you think that, I mean, that's a very like bold thing to say, and do you think that might have had like driven some people maybe like how kind of extreme that claim is? Because I feel I can understand why some people might be like, oh, I just want someone just like the administration to fit into that cookie cutter mold of like, oh, well, this is what an ASB president is supposed to be. Like, how do you think that impacted you? Because like what you're saying is,
well, here's the way I see it. If you think that there are people, if people think that there's a status quo that has to be met when you're running for a student government office, then you're part of the problem. You're just as much of the problem as the administration, which is making the rules that everyone just wants to abide by, which might not be fair for certain people in the school. So if you think something I'm saying or doing is too extreme, then why are you voting? I mean, whatever way a person like that chooses, they're just going to vote for another status quo person who's going to get into like UC Davis or something. Um, so their vote doesn't really make a difference. They're just the enforcement of the ways that things are.
mhm.
Furthermore, I think that video, because of how fiery it was, or not, how provocative it was, it reached out to a lot more people. A lot more people started hearing about this and talking about it. Um, so I think if anything, it raised my popularity. And if it didn't raise my popularity, then yeah, maybe I'm at the wrong school.
Yeah, definitely. Well, then going from there, it's like you're in quarantine, so it's a lot more social media stuff. How do you think that impact? Like, how did you respond, and how do you think that impacted not being able to be at Drake on campus, convincing people face to face?
At first, I saw it as an issue. I saw it as, oh crap, I'm not going to be able to reach out to people on the engagement level I could have. As time wore on, I realized that Instagram as a platform, social media as a platform in general, was a huge advantage to me. People like certain political opponents of mine, they run very heavily on their own popularity and friend connections. That's how they get voted in. That's how they consistently get into office. So I don't have that kind of connections. I'm not really a loner, not anymore. Like I have my own group of friends, but it's not big. It's like 15 people. Outside of that, it's just like acquaintances and people I'm friendly with and talk to in class, but not like hanging out at lunch or after school. Um, so I didn't really have a social platform. So social media could easily make up for that. It did not stop the administration from trying to get to me though. Um, Sometime after that video that I posted about me willing to get suspended, I got an email from the administration that was basically saying, hey, you're not in trouble, but we want to talk to you. And the whole video chat with the admins was basically them saying, we're uncomfortable with what you're doing. We don't want you to do it. And we're trying not to make it obvious that we have no way of stopping you right now. Um, so I thought that was kind of funny that for a group of people seemingly so powerful that they were not able to do anything at this point because of the present conditions of school, about what I was saying and doing online. Um, so later on, I started raising the presence of the party, started posting more, started doing polls. I'm gonna try starting to do that again. Um, and things seemed amazing. I mean, from all the sources I was talking to, it seemed that the vast majority of people supported the party.
Hmm.
Um,
And
and
what
then,
I saw was that like if you got to talk to someone and actually like explain what you're for and what you're doing, I would say the vast majority of those people were like, oh, actually, yeah, this person is someone I'd want to vote for. And the thing going against you is that you didn't have that like popularity web that Ella might have had, where it's just like, oh, I know who she is. I'm gonna vote for her just because I know who she is. And so like I credit like that part to you. Like when people got to talk to you, they liked your ideas. And yeah, just being on social media, continue to try to get out to people and boost it up. Because and I can see why when you're talking to people, they're like, oh yeah, like I would support you. It's because like when you talk to them, they will.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. So mid-May came around, and I remember I was waking up, getting out of bed, and I got a notification from Ray Holmberg that I was not on the list of elected students. So that was disappointing. For a while, I felt like I failed that kid in freshman year who ended it, and I felt like what was the point of me trying to do all this? Like, why was I trying to help people at all when there was this group of people at the top who could easily take down anything I was doing or saying for whatever reason? But I'm not prone to long periods of self-doubt and misery and self-loathing. So I have a plan for senior year.
That's good to hear.
And just because I am leaving Drake soon does not mean that the party is going to be disappearing. Actually, I might as well use this podcast for a bit of a platform, because the party, it's going to need a new leader, a sophomore or a junior, to take over the social media and be willing to run for student government. This is a political party, after all, at Drake. And if suddenly nobody is manning it anymore, it will obviously die out quickly.
Well then, yeah, why don't you talk more specifically to kind of what the party stands for and what like you or the party, like what are the changes it wants to get done? Because obviously there's meaning behind what you're doing, and there's obviously like there's been opposition from the administration. So I'm interested to hear more like specifically like what is the platform of the party, and like what do you guys want to do?
Well, essentially, the idea that the party presents, an idea that we call academicism, is the idea that student happiness and freedom comes from the ability to determine what they're allowed to say and do in the different platforms of the school that they're in, and that the best way to ensure that they get the right to express those things is best done through large groups, because an individual cannot get as much done as a group. That's why it's an academic party and not just me pushing for the idea of academicism. Because if it was just me and I left the school, then later generations would have no problem with the administration going, well, how about we make it where ASB is not allowed to object to any of the decisions made by exterior groups in the school district. Or let's make it where, what was another thing? Let's give students a hard time getting organic cabbage into the canteen. I remember that was a thorn in ASB's side a while ago. Stuff like that.
So giving people the opportunity, like allowing people to like be independent and not have like the administration kind of be so controlling of what you can and can't do.
It's kind of a paradoxical situation, because in high schools, with the social situations that we have, the social setup there is, and the presence of the administration makes it where the best way to protect the rights and privileges of the student body and to help them feel wanted and needed is through groups. It's through people, not just through an individual's deciding that they're going to do this, but through people as a group deciding they're going to help other people. I mean, I walked through the hallways. Well, I walked through the hallways every day at lunch, and I saw every day certain people who just did not have anybody around them. I mean, those people could find a place in the party. Ultimately, the party is going to be, I hope that the party becomes a place where it's effectively like one big group of people who feel like they can rely on one another without any kind of social pressure besides the pressure of getting their ideals through to student government and the high school at large.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you see with stuff, especially public schools, there's this bureaucracy that you see when it's like this government thing. And so, like, obviously there's the administrative, and then there's the board, and then there's like greater areas. And so, like, with all that, you get, like, when you want to make changes happen, when you want to make a change, it's so hard to do because there's so many like levels of red tape.
Level. It's
Yeah.
hard to do for one person.
Yes.
It's not so hard for 300 people to do.
Exactly. And I think that's why the idea is so powerful. It's like, if you can get a group of people together, then you can make this change, but it's just a matter of getting those people together. And yeah, what do you think? Like, the administration, obviously they had a problem, and I think there's partially it's probably due to you individually, which is like probably hard to like just know that that's part of it, that they're specifically targeting you. But like, what are some, you mentioned a few examples, but like, what do you think the administration is so against when it comes to the party? Obviously you're taking power away, but
yeah. Well, I think you kind of nailed it on the head there. I think that the administration sees the presence of a group of people who speak for the student body as a singular group. They see that as threatening because a group like that will naturally have some level of authority. They do not want a divide of subservience in the student body between them and anything else. The moment that happens, that makes admins anxious. It makes them worried, and they jump back to stuff like, well, you can't have Drake in the name. You can't be the Drake Academic Party. So yeah, if there's a group, any group on campus, which is saying, hey, we want to give the kids something, and it doesn't pass completely through the administration is going to have problems with it, and they're going to do whatever they can to squash it.
mm-hmm.
So,
well, and even
yeah, and that's basically what happened to me.
And like, even when for the ASB president, like, as the Thinkers Club, we wanted to do a debate, and we were met with opposition from ASB and more over the administration saying like, oh no, you can't do that because it's ASB thing. Like, it must be the administration. There must be like an admin there to supervise what you're doing. And like, the only way we could do it is like, oh, it's a club event, you must keep it in the club or whatever, stuff like that. And so obviously, like, that's just another example that hits like closer to home for me, because we're excited with like, this is a great, why would inspiring like intellectual debate and discussion about issues that we're having at Drake, why should that be an issue for
why is that an issue on a campus which is designed to educate people, which is designed for the passing and exchange of knowledge? Why is that such an issue? Why does everything have to be controlled? Ultimately, it's a question about efficiency on the hand of the administration. They want to be efficient. They want everything to work smoothly, clean, have no issues, and most certainly not make them or anyone else in the higher clique that is TAM district. They don't want any of that to look bad. If something does any of those things, if somebody does any of those things, they'll converge on that. They'll converge on that person or group's position.
Mm-hmm. And well, to like kind of advocate on behalf of the administration, they're tasked with this like goal of educating and looking out for this body of students. And obviously there's probably not one super easy way to do it through an administration. And so I, they definitely aren't doing it perfectly, but I feel like they are doing things that are trying to like ensure that people are okay. Like they've implemented wellness when it comes to mental health, and they have other like programs trying to make sure people are doing okay in the school. But what I also like see is that when it comes to school, they're really focusing on that like middle of the bell curve of the students. They want to make sure that those people feel comfortable because that is the majority of the people. And as a kind of as a public administration, they want the most people to be satisfied. And as long as those like the majority of people are satisfied, they don't the like people on the ends of the bell curve, they don't need to look out for as much. But I would say that they are trying. But to your point, I do think it should start with the students because the students know the students best, and the administration should be kind of advocating on the students' behalf to allow them to have discussions, which is why I think the idea behind your party and the values is very valuable to the students. And even if you're not in ASB, next year, kind of instilling those principles in people and like continue to try to push for students' rights and also the ability to focus on what they want to focus on.
Yeah. Drake is an incredible school. Like, make no mistake, compared to a lot of schools and the stories I've heard about them, Drake is amazing. With that said, I still think it's necessary that some changes are implemented. And while some people might go, hey, this is a great school you're at, why are you complaining? It's like, I'm not really complaining so much as I'm advocating for something else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an opportunity, basically, for kids at Drake to stop and consider, what do they want the future of their high school to look like? What do they think the next generation of students are going to want to be living under? Do they want to be living under the assault of gunfire and news that their friends and family are dead? Do they want to be living with a lack of human connection and feeling as if the platforms that the administration set up as student platforms have no connection to them? Or do they want to live in a high school where they feel like they have a connection to not just friends, but the community at large, and that they feel like the platforms, which are supposed to give students a voice, actually give students a voice?
Mm-hmm. Well, in that case, you like hinted at stuff coming for the future, and so I don't know how much you have cemented, but I'd be interested to hear kind of what you want to do going into the future for the people at Drake. And secret, we'll
The
see.
secret.
All
You'll
right.
find
Well, I'm sure there's good stuff in store. But yeah, I think it is important to continue that. But also, I think it's interesting because for high school students generally, I feel like there's a large range of people in high school. And what would you have to say? Because I feel like there are certain people that just look for that typical high school experience. What do you have to say to those people when it comes to issues like this?
What I have to say is that for those people, their lives will not change one bit. For people who want to have a happy and normal student life, odds are, well, no, not odds are, we aren't making the world a better place for them because they already have a great world. They already have they already have the friends and the grades and whatnot. If they do, if they don't, the party is an opportunity for them to get help, for them to feel supported, and for them to feel like they're not alone, and for them to get their views onto a larger platform.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, and then speaking also to the future, even if it's not exactly for Drake or the party, I'm interested to hear kind of just like in general, do you have an idea of like what you want to go, where you want to go in the future? Because
I did.
you do.
Yeah.
Well, I
Uh,
love to hear that because not that many students are kind of as aware as you are, I'd say, and so just to,
uh,
yeah.
a lot of it's secret. Unfortunately, like most of my future plans, I try and keep this stuff um, under the radar until I actually have it going, like you saw at the party. Because that was being worked on for years before you or anyone else ever heard of it. Like I was working on it before I disappeared in sophomore year. Um, what I can say is that I'm probably going to go to Santa Rosa JC. Um, and after that, I'm going to try and figure out some way to try and get into a college in Norway because I've been learning the language for, I think, almost a year now, and I'm getting pretty good. Um, I'm having my fingers crossed. At this point, I don't know if it's going to happen. It's kind of wishful thinking,
Hmm.
but it'd be a very cool thing to see, regardless. The main point of me trying to get into Norway is to try and get in contact with family that I have over there, and not have to be thousands of dollars in debt like I would be in America, since I'm not exactly a valedictorian.
Hmm.
Um, Besides that, um, I think you all can probably expect that I'm going to be taking positions in the community and in jobs that I take, maybe even instinctually, positions of leadership and trying to make a change in those groups. Maybe not on the same level as the DAP. I mean, unless a job I go to is extremely corrupt or something. Um, but yeah, at the end of the day, well, at the end of whatever I do in life, I'm probably
Hmm.
gonna just like settle down on a little homestead kind of thing. Because as much as I like bringing people together and making them change something, honestly, I'm a little bit more of an introvert. And after all that business, I could use some alone time.
Yes, of course. Well, even just like attempting, even if it's just this, like attempting to try to make a positive change is very valuable. You've definitely gave a lot of effort, um, and you've kind of had this incredible journey as of so far. I'm sure you'll continue to have this incredible journey. But do you think that kind of where you came from, and we don't have to get into all the details, but maybe if you just provide a kind of brief overview, you heard that before, but a brief overview, kind of what you went through. Do you think having gone what you've gone through has made you more wanting to advocate for certain people that
Yes,
feel left out? Yeah.
big yeah. Yeah. If I had a platform to talk about what was happening, and if I had a support group of some kind, like things would have been a lot better a lot quicker. It's only because of people like my foster dad, Scott. Like he single-handedly saved my ass because I was going to be going out to a group home in the mountains of Utah, uh, where if you try to escape, they have like the farmers shoot at you and stuff. It's insane because everyone was convinced I was a school shooter. And he managed to save me because he's got a lot of prestige in the foster community. Uh, but before that point, before I was locked away, and um, before I was locked away in either the police station or in my house, starving, having a bunch of people to go to and saying, "Hey, this is what's happening in here," would have been amazing. Like things would have worked out so much smoother. Along with that, my experiences talking to other kids who I met during that time, who were in similar situations, it made me realize that oftentimes groups in power tend to take a very um, how do you say, artificial approach to taking care of the kids, and that messes them up a lot. And I feel like in a lot of ways we're seeing a milder version of that here at Drake right now.
Hmm. Well, I think Drake is definitely lucky to have someone like you who's had to go through that experience and kind of be a voice that people can listen to, be like, and like you're just a very unique perspective on. And I think if people at least just listen, and maybe they don't agree completely, but at least listen to what you have to say, because not everyone has the chance to hear someone or hear a story like yours. And I think kind of that's what almost one of the biggest things that you can do is kind of just share your story and allow people to experience that perspective. And kind of finishing off, if you had like one thing you wanted people to do, like students at a high school or Drake specifically, like what would you encourage them to do?
What would I encourage them to do? Organize and act, not necessarily for a specific goal, not necessarily because everyone thinks it's the most important thing to do, but because the more people organize things on a mass scale and try getting them into effect, the more people will see how the administration reacts to that, and more people will be motivated to take actions for their community and for their fellow students. And if enough of that happens, I think eventually we could see a new era of high school in our country. Because right now we're in a really dark time. But if people are willing to come together in general, we could come out of this.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that note, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Absolutely.
The idea behind this is getting people, and even if it's not as much acting, but at least getting people together and thinking. And so, yes, thank you so much. You definitely provide a very unique perspective, as I said before. And I hope your quarantine continues to not be terrible, at least. So thank you.
Yeah. All right.